You mentioned this vaguely towards the end of your talk this morning for memorial service. You said, joy comes even in times of disaster. I don't know if this was an implied title, because we didn't get a title prior to the talk, as usual with memorial services, but would you admit that this is a title?
Yes. Actually, I did state it right up at the front, but
okay,
we might have to go to the tape for evidence. But
I was probably getting coffee. Hey, it's a Sunday morning. It's a Sunday morning. I probably came in a little bit late.
But joy in the time of disaster is kind of like, what you may call a paradox of sorts, because when people are going through difficult times, they really, don't want to hear the word joy. Yeah. They just want to have a pity party.
Exactly.
Pretty much.
Okay, and so you focus kind of on First Chronicles chapter 16. For the people watching, just give a quick summary if you wouldn't mind.
Yes, First Chronicles 16 really focuses on David finally getting the ark to Zion, and he's having a Thanksgiving service of sorts, but a huge Thanksgiving service, one in which he has already outlined who the high priest is going to be, who the choir master is going to be, who the singers are going to be, who's going to lead the praise and worship. Mm-hmm. Everything is already outlined, and he's there to give God thanks because he has overcome a great tragedy in his life where a great error had occurred and it was disastrous. So he has to overcome that feeling of anger, bitterness that he was dealing with.
How can anger slow down progress? How can anger slow down God's work?
Well, what I find is that when people are angry, they tend to become bitter. And when bitterness gets, incorporated in someone's life, then they become resentful. And then resentful is like a foothold that takes a root of its own and grows into a huge tree of, continual discontentment. And as a result, that person is unable to progress doing the work of God because they're just finding ways and means to, kind of sabotage themselves or others.
Does this go back to the pity party?
Yes. And we saw that in First Chronicles 13, when David first started on the journey with great thanksgiving, and he had everything, all his ducks lined up in a row. So he thought, with trying to transport the ark on a new cart and with oxen, not realizing that it was of decree by God that the Kohats, who were the Levites, would carry the ark on their shoulders, raise it up. And it would be, done in a way that gave God glory. He did it the way the Philistines did it, which was to carry it on a cart until there was an accident. The oxen kind of stumbled. The ark was falling. Uzzah tried to hold it, and he died. He was smitten by God.
Wow.
And so there was a great tragedy in his life.
Yeah.
And that of the nation, by the way.
Is there more detail that we could go into on this resentment and the anger that David had and the space that, possibly by force, that he had to create to get over that, to fulfill God's will? Can you expound on that a little bit?
Yes, definitely. I mean, we're told that God was angry, and there was a breach made upon Uzzah, and the area is called Perez Uzzah unto this day. So it's like a memorial of that tragedy that happened, kind of like 9/11. Every year they remember the victims, and they go to that spot and they have the names and they have all this memorializing happening. What happened was, when David saw what happened, he was displeased. I'm sure he wasn't the only one. But the word that was used for displeased is the word anger. So we find that God is angry, David is angry. The question is asked, if God and man is angry, who wins? There definitely is a no contest. We can't stand before God.
Not at all.
But we're told in the Psalm 30 that God's anger endures for a moment. His mercy is everlasting. So that is the beauty about God's relationship with man. So David had to learn that. And at the time, the next thing we know, we're told that David was fearful, right?
As he should have been.
Because he knew where he was going with this. This wasn't going to end nice, for him or the nation. And he left the ark in the home of a Gittite by the name of Obed-Edom. And Think about it for a minute. We're dealing with God's anger. People are fearful. The Thanksgiving service has suddenly gone awry. Nobody wants to deal with it. They want no part of it. Obed-Edom volunteers to have the ark in his home.
Obed-Edom, he was built a little bit different than the rest of the people.
Definitely. So it stays there 3 months while David is cooling off.
Yeah.
So it shows us that when we're angry, we need space. We need time to really, see really truly what the matter was about. Because you could see him like blaming God, for something that God had told him by design in Numbers 4:15, that they were supposed to do using the Kohathites.
I think all of us attempt to be the best version of ourselves for God. And we fall short, as we know. But even David, the great man that he was, the great king that he was, fell short even in his instincts. His instincts were off at times. And so what is that message there for all of us who think that we get suited up, we throw on ties on Sunday mornings, we do Bible studies, we do everything, we try to get things right. But being able to live with the understanding and the grace for not just self, but the grace for others, that we can get it wrong at times. What's your viewpoint on that?
I think it's a message of humility.
Yeah.
Because honestly, after you've done the best you can, you still realize you fall short.
Yeah.
And David was a man that studied the word of God day and night. Mm-hmm. I mean, many of his Psalms, we still meditate upon it. Mm-hmm. He knew the law, and those around him knew it. He had the army he had consulted with, and he had consulted with the priests. And still, there was that missing link. And it goes to show that even when we try to do our very best, there are times when we will fall short. And if we have pride will, first we will try to do is cover up the error. We won't want to admit that we're wrong. And when you cover up a situation, you only make it worse. Mm-hmm. So the real humility we see in David, and I think that's the difference we see in David, the man after God's own heart. When Nathan came to him and started telling him the story, he says, you're the man. He admitted, and he repented, and he did the necessary things to change. And we see after that 3-month period, David went back, got the Levites, got the Kohathites, had them fetch that ark the right way, still had his Thanksgiving service, but he was ready.
He was ready. And so this goes back to that break, that period of while you're getting over anger or your resentment, being able to step back for a second, not from the work of God, because you made this clear this morning, the work must continue, but being able to take time to meditate and really figure out where's this anger and resentment coming from, kind of goes back to getting in sync with God and the unison that we should be aspiring to be with, not with our own, not with you, as much as I admire, my mentors and older brothers and sisters in the truth. But sometimes that can get in the way, and the person that we need to be, the one that we need to be in sync with is God's will. And so how can not letting these speed bumps work in our favor to that cause? As in, we can get confused at times, but the constant searching and the constant prayer is really where we need to be.
David said best, he says, seek ye the face of God. We have to be in constant seeking with. And we saw in the life of Jesus, who David, even when he got the 15th chapter, how he was, dressed like a priest, sharing the bread and wine to the people, how he was acting like Christ, putting on the mind of Christ, which is love God and then love man. Understanding that there's a complete connection between our relationships with God and our brothers and sisters. And so when we keep that in mind, whatever is happening in our lives, we have to make reconciliation. There are times when we're going to have to sit people down and say, brother, sister, I was wrong.
Yeah.
I mean it, and what can we do to make amends? If the person is willing to sit with us and come together in that spirit and the mind of Christ, we can be able to overcome those periods of anger and resentment and bitterness that, if given too much room, will become the biggest room in our houses.
Wow. On that note, I think this is enough. Sunday morning, there's a tradition of Sunday morning service, right? But there's something refreshing to knowing that we're in a new week, and that when you come out to the ecclesia hall or the church, you can get motivated to proceed and go forth, right, by the grace of God. And I think this talk this morning, and hopefully the people can see this, that this is something for all of us to implement. This is practical applications of the word, right?
Definitely. And remember this, the only ones that don't make mistakes is the one who never tried. So if you want to be, hiding on the fence and trying to be like, behind the scene, you're going to imagine you have a perfect life.
Yeah.
But when you're out there in the trenches, you're always going to fall short. But we serve a God of great mercy and a God of great glory and a God that is willing to forgive.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Brother Tyrone, once again for your contributions. And thank you all for watching. And be blessed.
Indeed.